Hello and welcome to Nutrition and Alternative Medicine. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's show. But before we get started on today's show, I just want to remind you we are getting very close to the last releasing what weighs you down in the way that we're going to be presenting it here in January. So January 10th through the 13th is the last scheduled live event like this, and I promise it will be worth it for you to attend. ReleasingWhatWeighsYouDown.com. If you are on the fence, we can work it out. If you're feeling called, I promise there will be transformation. A lot of the people who have come to both events this year, I have watched their businesses and their lives change. Now, not everyone has the same results, but I have seen someone, a friend of mine, who is a Capricorn with a Taurus moon, who's got so many Earth planets, as stubborn as could be. I've seen her life transform. And it's been awesome to be a part of that and to know that the tools that were provided at both events have made a big difference in her life. So releasingwhatweighsyoudown.com, you still have time to come in January, and we'd love to support your transformation. So today's show, the Mind Hack Success Model, is an interesting story about how I met David Bayer. It was actually at the New Media Summit. He presented his Mind Hack Success Model and just the Mind Hack idea. And he was on stage and he's got a compelling story. He had good graphics. And as he was speaking, I was sitting with some people who I know in the past, when I have presented them with sort of ideas of law of attraction, weren't opposed to it, but I know it didn't resonate like it does for me and like it does for a lot of you. But yet I watched David present something, and he said in the beginning that it kind of wasn't law of attraction, and then he proceeded, and the more he talked and the more he showed his slides, and I kept saying, no, this is law of attraction. This is law of attraction, just packaged differently as a technology and as a structure. And I watched this person who didn't resonate with general, like the way that I deal with law of attraction, get really excited and think, oh my God, this is it. And I watched that response and thought, okay, now I wasn't sure if David was going to be into having a conversation with me, because I kind of wanted to have an argument or a fight. I mean, not that I wanted to fight with him, but I thought if he's going to stick with his position that this isn't law of attraction, then we're going to have an argument. But what I came to find out is that he has done a lot of the similar things that I have done. He's even been to an Abraham Hicks event. So I know that part of the positioning that he took at this event was for entrepreneurs. And again, the way that it resonates with him is in more of a structure, in more of a scientific, laid out understanding. And we're saying some of the same things, just delivered in different ways. But I'm bringing him on. So this is not going to be a tie situation where we're going to have an argument about law of attraction. I'm bringing him on because I know there's a lot of you out there, and I say this in the show, that you want to believe, you want it to be true for you, what I'm saying, which is why you keep listening. But you're not quite there yet. And a lot of you are there, and you get it, and you're with me, and that's why you're still here. But there's a certain percentage of you who want to get it, but it doesn't resonate yet. And I think David's way of explaining how this all works and his techniques and the way that he has structured it will be of value to you. So I really look forward to sharing today's show. It's a little bit longer than normal, so beware of that. David Bayer is an author, speaker, entrepreneur, and CEO of David Bayer Transformational Programs, a global coaching and training company focused on helping entrepreneurs, organizations, and individuals harness the maximum power of human performance, intelligence, and potential. David has been recognized as a leading expert on mindset and business in his event, The Powerful Living Experience, which was named by Inc. as the top 3 must-attend personal development events for entrepreneurs. David's book, Mind Hack, has had over 100,000 downloads and is a philosophical and scientific exploration of the power of thought and provides a practical step-by-step framework for evolving into that next level of human potential and what David calls becoming a phenomenon. David's mindset and business coaching programs are delivered by his international team of certified coaches and trainers, helping entrepreneurs and individuals achieve the highest level of personal and professional performance. You may download a free copy of David's book, plus get a 4-part training series when you go to mindhackprogram.com/JJ. Again, that's mindhackprogram.com/JJ. Welcome to the show, David.
JJ, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I am very excited about this conversation that we're about to have today, as I've already shared with the audience where I met you and how I saw you present, and sort of the hook that grabbed me into thinking you would be perfect for my listeners and to be on the show, and for me to share your work with the people who listen to my work, because you're the yang, if you will, to my yin, in terms of the information that you give being more scientifically delivered in a way that more people can maybe digest it. I'm very much about the law of attraction and astrology and spirituality, and delivering information in a physics way, in a way we're using emotion, we're talking about embodiment. And when I heard you present, and I loved everything that you were talking about, and I know I've already told you what ran through my mind is, yeah, law of attraction says this too. Yeah, law of attraction says this too. But you presented it and I know it goes beyond that for you, and there's more that's inclusive and it goes way beyond. But I loved your mind hack system. And so I have your book. It's awesome. And today I wanted to bring you on to, and maybe we might get into a little tit for tat about law of attraction. We may or may not. But I really think your work is powerful. And I want to share the mind hack success model that you've used to grow your business. And while the bio didn't include that, do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of that transformation for you, that story that I remember that was so powerful about sort of hitting that rock bottom?
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me on the show, and I've enjoyed being able to have a conversation with someone who is as knowledgeable about the topic as you leading into the call. So I've been really looking forward to this. Yeah. So I've been an entrepreneur since I was 22 years old, 43 now. And about 10 years into my entrepreneurial journey, I entered into what, I now describe as the dark side of entrepreneurship, where the building of businesses didn't actually fill the emptiness that was inside of me. And I was running a venture-backed company in my early 30s and had raised millions of dollars and hired a team of 25 to 30 people. My life had become unmanageable. So my foray into self-awareness and personal development was through 12-step recovery. I realized I had a problem drinking, I had a problem drugging, I had a problem working. I just had developed a really addictive behavior set. And so I started working a 12-step program that's, in 12-step, they teach you about a power greater than yourself, whatever that is for you. For me, it's God. I started trusting life a little bit more. I started becoming aware of my inner world. I realized that there was a ton of what we now call unintelligent thinking taking place that was causing me a tremendous amount of suffering in my life. And that was the beginning of a really beautiful journey that's gone on for a decade now. I think within the same month, I went to Miami International Airport and I was in the bookstore, and there was this book that just kind of called to me from the shelf, and I grabbed the book and I turned it over, and on the back of the book was written the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. So I'm working a 12-step program. I'm starting to study the tenets of Buddhism. And then one of my employees left a book called Kingdom Principles on my desk that I got right when I got back from that trip, which was the kind of the truth through the lens of the teachings of Christ. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of similarities in all this stuff. And about a week later, David was not an avid reader back then. I went to a bookstore. I went to the self-help section, and literally laying on the floor in the middle of the aisle was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So that opened me up to a new reality, which I think is the reality. And for the last decade, I've been really obsessed about it. And about 3 years ago, my girlfriend, who's now my fiance, said, you really should just, go teach this stuff. Because I was at a crossroads in my life where, as you start to quote unquote wake up, you realize, what you're doing is not maybe what's in alignment with you. And all I really wanted to do was continue to immerse myself in personal growth and to share what I discovered with other people. So I put together a little workshop. Had about 20 people in the room, shared what I knew, saw how much it impacted them. And, and that was 3 years ago. And that's what I get to wake up and do every day now.
I love that you were attracted to Think and Grow Rich. I have not done a show about that yet. And it really, to me, is one of the starting places for law of attraction and some of this work. And so tell me how you developed the mind hack success model. Was it a combination of, actually, no, before we get to that, are you a Sagittarius? What's your birthday? Are you December?
I'm a Leo.
You're a Leo. I knew you were a fire sign. Okay. Because I think I'd asked you, right? You were a Leo. I asked you when I met you because I was like, okay, I need to know your sign. All right. You're a Leo. Perfect. And for anyone who has never met David in person, he's also what, 6'6"?
Yeah, I'm about 6'7" on a
Yeah,
good day.
6'7". Yeah, Leo, like just commands the stage, and is a big presence both energetically as well as physically. So congratulations on your success. And I am very inspired by the path that you've taken and the fact that you're talking about all of this and in the way that you're delivering it. I want to talk about that 12-step program for a second, though, not
Mhm.
the exact, but did you find, because I haven't really addressed this on the show ever before, I have very strong opinions about 12-step programs, so in both ways, positive and negative, right? So can you tell me what your experience was? Did you come out of that thinking, wow, this was the best thing that's ever happened to me, and and that this is for everybody, and this was the end, and this was enough? Or did it just sort of light the fire, and then past that you said, well, I want more, and while this was great to get me started, there's so much more?
Yeah, so addiction is an interesting concept because at some level, most of humanity is addicted to the negative bias of the mind, right? Focusing on worry, anxiety, problems, comparing yourself to other people. There's a lot inherent in the structure of who we are that's designed for survival. And so, over time, whatever works starts working more. For me, I tethered all of those insecurities and those thoughts and those stressors to drugging and drinking and acting out. So, in the beginning, when you want to start really dehabituating yourself to those behaviors and that thinking, you have to immerse yourself in community that has very structured philosophy and structured teaching. And you have to kind of surrender your own behavior over to the advice of others who are not caught up in that darkness. And so, if you're talking about addiction, there aren't a lot of places to go. So I think the 12-step community is a great community to start out in. One of the challenges is that you get to a point in the structure of that program where sort of the penultimate aspect of that program, the highest level of growth, which is the 12th step, is giving back to those who are on the journey behind you and struggling, and supporting them in the way that you were supported, and also giving back to that community. What I found was that in order to truly move forward in your life, you have to have vision. You have to have a vision for something greater than you. You have to have goals. You have to have something you're striving for. You have to be, moving through the challenges of life, because that's what aids your continued development. And if you don't have that, then it's really easy to go back to old behaviors. So, there's that idea of if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. And I think, and it's just my opinion, doesn't mean it's right or wrong, I think one of the reasons why so many people have a hard time staying sober, who are working a 12-step program, is the absence of that future forward vision and the tools to actually move forward and achieve it. In fact, I remember early on when I started to step into this new identity, a lot of really well-meaning people in that program said, maybe you shouldn't do this. It can create additional stress or anxiety, and you might slip back into your addictive behaviors. I found it just to be the opposite, that it was much easier to slip back into my addicted behaviors when I didn't have a spiritual vision, when I didn't have something that was larger than where I was at in my life at the moment to kind of build towards. I think that's a critical component of being happy in your life. And it's a natural aspect of the geometry of life itself. We see that all intelligence, all living things, all energy is constantly seeking to expand. And so unless you have that capacity, it's very easy to move back into some form of suffering.
I love that you just mentioned about expansion, because that's one of the things I don't like about the 12-step program. Now, mind you, I am all about someone needs to go where they can get community and help. And I believe that I've even told my mother and my brother to go to a 12-step program. I did Al-Anon for about 4 months, and it definitely was a lifesaver, because my vibration was sort of really low. I was in a place of feeling like a victim and feeling disempowered and and so through about 4 months of doing like an Al-Anon program, the person who was my qualifier was not an alcoholic, by the way. So, but I used that sort of community and the steps within the Al-Anon program to get me to a better feeling place of empowerment, to learn how to lovingly detach. That was probably the biggest thing about that program, was lovingly detached is really what I got. And I honestly see, my filter is so law of attraction. I heard law of attraction in that program. I was like, okay, that's exactly what law of attraction is about. Like, I hear it everywhere. And so I'm so tuned to it. So I got to the place where I felt more empowered. And then but then my sort of frequency was higher than everybody else's at that point. Like I felt like there was a lot of victimization continuing going on. And that's why I asked you about your experience. I think there's, people can find good and bad in any kind of program, and it can be a life changer for some. I did a whole show on addiction, and that show we talked about really the root of all addiction is sort of that lack of expression of emotions that we all have. And it doesn't matter if it's alcohol or drugs or workaholism or shopping or avoidance or technology, that any of these things that keep us from sort of expressing and going towards that bigger vision and embodying and expanding. It's really not about the alcohol or about the drugs or about the whatever. And so I think that kind of is in alignment with what you just talked about, having that bigger vision, that bigger commitment, that trust in a higher power, that something that not only gives back, but it moves you forward in a new way that can allow you to heal and allow you to release some of the lower level stories that we tell ourselves or limiting beliefs. And anyway, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of the 12-step program, but because you mentioned it, and some people, I have a client right now who has one more addiction. Well, actually he's got two. He still smokes. And I said to him, I would encourage you not to stop smoking until you're really ready to heal your issues. Because, he's like, oh, well, I've recovered from drugs, I've recovered from alcohol, but and I'm ready to stop smoking. I'm like, you're not yet, because the anger is still, you taper it off by now being addicted to 12-step programs. So you go to meetings all the time, and that is now the new addiction to, but you actually haven't really healed the core wounds that are in there. So there hasn't been true transformation. There's been management of your circumstances. There's been some healing. I don't mean to make it sound like he hasn't done any work, but anyway, so I just wanted to sort of utilize that to take this conversation now into, you came out of that, you expanded, you are committed to this vision. When you were talking, I had a client, a therapist once, who said to me, and I asked your astrology for this very reason. She's a Taurus. And she put me on a pedestal. She was the first person to tell me that I was gifted. She was the first person to validate so many things about me that I didn't really ever think about. And I wasn't even looking for it. And she just sort of clinically said, well, here's the reason why you're sort of unique and different and special, and why you don't really get along with or can connect to these kinds of people, because you think like this and your brain works like this. And I was like, wow, okay. But she said to me, sometimes I think you look too far outside of yourself. And now she's a Taurus, and for Taurus people, being grounded, going within, listening to your inner guidance, that's really important. Now, the inner guidance and intuition is important for me too, but as a Pisces with a lot of Sag and a lot of fire, if I don't make myself one with God or the universe or something way bigger than me to make a difference, then that's what calms me. So I totally relate to your expansion idea of that. What really started to heal you in a new way and progress you was connecting to that bigger mission, that goal that you have for yourself and for others, and really helping and giving back. So now let's go back to the first question I had, which was about how you created and developed the Mind Hack Success Model, and what you're doing now, how you took from where you were coming out of that 12-step, having the community, having now a new vision. How did you create what you're doing now?
So, I went through a pretty intense journey, like a lot of people who are probably listening to this conversation. I went, from 12-step into personal development and spirituality. And the journey, JJ, is a funny journey when you really think about it. I tell the story of going to a personal development event, going to a second personal development event, going to a third personal development event. Of course, I'd read all of the requisite personal development books. Like by the time you hit your third event, you're now a personal development junkie. And so then you start going down the rabbit trail. I remember I went from the mainstream events into the Landmark Forum, and then I went and saw Abraham Hicks live, and I actually sat in the hot seat and asked Abraham Hicks a question. And then I went to Sedona, and I spent 6 weeks meditating on red rocks as I was developing my meditation practice and spending time in vortexes. And while I was there, the Arawakan and Kogi Indians, which is one of the elder Mayan tribes, emerged from the first time in history during the 2012 shift. And I found myself sitting for 3 days with them in a gymnasium while the translator was translating what they believed the shift was about. And there you go, deeper and deeper and deeper. I've been to India 4 times now, training in ashrams. I've done the ayahuasca journey with a shaman. It was like this really intense journey to find myself. And oftentimes you can get lost in all of that. And I got to a point where when I was really honest with myself, I looked at it and I said, I'm not experiencing what the promise of personal development has promised. And I now call it the broken promise of personal development, which is, I think, up until now, we've sort of been in what I would call personal development 1.0. And it's really been around since maybe the Jim Rohn of the 70s, or maybe even earlier with the Earl Nightingales, or you can look at the late 1800s where you had a group of really, knowledgeable men and women that were part of the New Thought movement, which was the predecessor to Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. But the truth is that I think most people intellectually understand that they are powerful creators, that they are the individual expression of all that is, that there's a powerful mathematics and geometry at work that we would call law of attraction that we're co-creating with. But we're still experiencing more stress, anxiety, overwhelm, comparing ourselves to other people, feeling like there's not enough time than we'd like to. And so when I speak all around the country, it's the first question I ask: how many of you have been in personal development for a while? You've read the books, you've gone to the events, you've hired the coaches, et cetera, and everybody raises their hand. Say, how many of you are still more stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed than you'd like to be in your life? And everybody raises their hand. And I go, that's called a failed protocol. By any measurement, that's a broken model. So if I was up on stage and I said, how many of you had high blood glucose sugar levels, and then we put you on a protocol as a pre-diabetic, and then we tested you again and you still had high blood glucose levels, we'd say, well, that doesn't work. So the work that we teach today was born out of a desire to take off the ceiling that I was experiencing in my own personal growth, and to bridge the gap to what has been called a lot of different things, right? Like the self-realization, or the kingdom of heaven, or whatever it is you want to call it, like through whatever lens. I wanted to learn how to live my life spending the vast majority of my time in joy, being non-reactive to the experiences of my life, and being intentionally creative and powerfully creating in every area of my life. And so that was the motivation for the work that you and I are going to talk about, and the evolution of that work since then.
I'm just laughing at our journeys. I experienced something somewhat similar when I wrote Fit to Love, which was one of my first books that came out. And I had manifested an investor with no strings attached, no payback necessary, like great situation. And when we get to publishing the book and figuring out the business plan, I want it in a certain way. And he was like, no, I'm only going to give you like a fraction of that. And I was like, okay, well, here's the deal. If this does not create enough momentum for me to sort of sit back and steer the ship, but I don't have to push it myself, then I'm not going to want to do this. And I got to the end where I had a really hard look at myself and said, wow, you are operating out of anxiety. Everything you are doing is trying to get to the end where you think you're going to feel better because you're going to have X, Y, or Z or some kind of success with this. And I'm like, what a hypocrite you are. You believe in the law of attraction, you talk about it, but you're not living it because you're not trusting it, because look what you're doing. So at the end of, I think that was 2011, I did sort of the opposite. I stopped everything I was doing. I stopped marketing. I stopped reading certain people's emails, and I stopped. I'm like, nope, I am not budging until I am inspired. I am divinely inspired to do something. I am going to live what I know is true. And it's going to take some courage because I have to let go of a lot of habits and patterns that I've sort of relied on along the way. But they were only just showing me that I didn't really believe it. I wasn't embodying it. So I agree with you. I've had conversation over and over again with people who want to, and I'm in agreement with everyone who has this conversation. The general population who talks about law of attraction doesn't live it. We know it intellectually, but we don't embody it, and we don't actually live it. And when you live it, all the things you just said about feeling better and having less stress and living in joy, all those things are what happens. But until we bridge the gap between the idea and the reality of our habits, behaviors, patterns, and things inside of us. And so I thought, while I talk about it and I teach it in some ways, the way that you present it, and what I love about the Mind Hack success model and the Mind Hack system and what you teach is it hits people at a different level. And there are people that hear me and go, yes. And there are some people that hear me and go, oh, I want to believe you, but I don't get it. And then they hear you. I know what's going to happen. For any of you listening to me who you just haven't clicked into it yet, you're going to click into it with David because I know who you are and I know how he's going to present it. And you're going to go, yes, that's what I've been looking for. Is it the same thing? It is to me, but it isn't going to be to you. And it is to me to a certain degree. I know that we can have more to talk about, but so know that I am wanting to support this lifestyle, this message, this embodiment, this transformation, this reality of all the things that we talk about here on the show and in all the work that I do. If you aren't living it yet and you think you're missing a piece, this may be the piece. So listen up, David. Now take us through the work that you have created called Mind Hack.
Yeah, so I think JJ, that's really well said. So it's the embodiment of it, and that was the question I sat in. Was I understand all this intellectually, but how can I live it? And for me, I needed to understand it through structure. I needed to understand it through science. I was not a faith-born person. My dad's Jewish, my mom's Lutheran. We celebrated Hanukkah, Easter, Passover, Christmas. We never went to church or temple. Like, it was very confusing, right? So there wasn't something for me to believe in. And so a lot of the foundation of the work that we teach was steeped in convincing myself of the truth. The truth that life is working for us moment by moment for our greatest growth, our greatest prosperity, our greatest evolution. And really understanding that what we're talking about is a change in the brain and a shift in the way that we vibrationally interact with a vibrational reality itself. And so at the core of what we teach is a distinction which is not mine. I learned it from one of my spiritual teachers and mentors, a man named Krishnaji in India. And he talks about the fact that there are only two states of being. He talks about beautiful states of being and suffering states of being. And what Krishnaji says is that you're always in one state of being or the other, and you're never in two states of being at the same time. And what's interesting is that this maps to the sympathetic and parasympathetic states of the nervous system. Also interesting is that it's binary. So it's very easy in any moment to go, am I in a beautiful state or am I in a suffering state? Beautiful states of being are states like joy, curiosity, calm, peace, excitement, states that feel good. Suffering states of being are states like boredom, jealousy, anger, fear, overwhelm, stress. So the name of the game of creating powerfully in your life and creating what you want out of your life, being successful as an entrepreneur, filling your bank account, achieving your full potential in the world, having extraordinary relationships, and by the way, also feeling good, is to notice when you've moved into a state of suffering and to have the tools to move back into a beautiful state. And if you make that the most important practice, like a living spiritual practice, that's what it is for me, over time, you will dehabituate yourself from the patterns of thinking that cause suffering, and you'll begin to consistently, automatically view life through the lens of a thinking that is conducive to being in a beautiful state. And what also happens when you do that is that you create what you want, because there's no judgment around if you're in a suffering state or if you're in a beautiful state. The way we look at that is there's just an acknowledgement that all of your creativity, your intuition, your inspiration, your resource, your health, your vitality, your presence, your connection to an intelligence greater than yourself, all of that is over there in a beautiful state of being. That's why it feels good. When you're in a suffering state, you've disconnected from all of that. So it's very difficult to create what you want. In fact, most of the time you're perpetuating into your future that which you don't want, because you're resonating from a suffering state, what we might describe as a lower level of vibration. And so, what we can start to hash out a little bit here is, okay, got it. So if I want to be in a beautiful state of being because it feels good and because I know that I'm then creating a future that I would look forward to, and that's where health is and energy is and presence is and everything I want. What do I do now that I notice that I've moved into a suffering state? That becomes the natural next question.
Okay, let's answer that question.
Okay. So, a lot of your listeners are already aware of this, but I'm going to layer in some 2-millimeter distinctions. So if there's only two states of being and everything we want comes from operating from a beautiful state of being, then the question is, well, what causes suffering? And what we see, and other great teachers have shared some perspective like this, is that all suffering, meaning that the experience of that emotional state, is caused by one thing and one thing only, which is your own thinking. That suffering is separate from any experience. So you kind of have experiences of your life, and experiences are really black and white. They don't have any, before they have meaning given to them, they don't have an emotional connection. So you could have two people in exactly the same experience. One thinks one thing about the experience and it produces a beautiful state of being. Like, I just lost my job, but I never really liked that job anyway. And I know life is always working for me. And this is a great opportunity to create the space for something else to come into my life. So that person might be in curiosity or joy or excitement around the experience of losing their job. Another person might be saying, my God, I'm not qualified to do anything else. I thought I was going to be in this job for the next 10 years. How am I going to pay my mortgage? So the thinking about the experience is what produces suffering. So suffering is separate from the experience, and the only cause of suffering is your own thinking. Now, in personal development, what I would call 1.0, the tendency is to identify the thinking that's causing suffering, which is also known as a limiting belief, and to try to create another story, to try to convince yourself of something else, or to try to override that limiting belief through a series of affirmations, right? So there's a tendency to notice the limiting belief and want to move away from it. What we teach is a little bit different in the sense that once you accept the fact that the suffering that your experience is caused by only your thinking, now we go and we explore the thinking, we identify the thinking, we actually want to move really closely to it. We want to look at the thinking, we want to grab the thinking, we want to observe the thinking. We want to see the thinking, but we want to see the thinking with a distinction that's very powerful, which is, if you're thinking something that doesn't feel good, meaning you've identified the thinking that's causing you the suffering state, what we've discovered is 100% of the time it's not true. You've entangled yourself with what we call the deep unreality. You've entangled yourself with some form of thinking that may seem true because you've, maybe early on decided that you can't trust people, or that you don't belong, or that you're not good enough. And the way that the brain works is it just starts to accumulate a lifetime of evidence to support that and ignore everything that might be counter to that. But what we found is that, in fact, the feeling of suffering is the body's response. Abraham Hicks calls it an emotional guidance system. It's the body's response to the fact that you've entangled yourself with unreality. And so we begin to explore this thinking that may seem true. Carol shouldn't have said that to me. JJ should have done something different. Life shouldn't be this way. There's not enough time. I'm not good enough. All of this thinking that doesn't feel good. What we do is we begin to approach it with the understanding that it's not true. And as we look closely at it, especially with the assistance of a coach or with the assistance of the larger body of work, which is our philosophy, there's a point in time when you actually see this unintelligent thinking as unintelligent. The moment you see the unintelligent thinking that is the only cause of your suffering, which is the only problem, as unintelligent, the brain immediately reorganizes around it. So if I can, I'll share a quick 1-minute story as an example.
Of course. Before you go though, I love the word unintelligent in terms of when you can recognize that this is a story you're telling yourself. Anyway, that for me was a good aha and a golden nugget. Go ahead with your story.
Yeah, sure. All of it is, we describe consciousness or God or love or energy. For us, the way I could wrap my mind around it is I describe it as intelligence. That is the underlying quality of what it is. In the beginning, all there was intelligence. And intelligence at some point in time wanted to know more and grow more and experience more, as is inherent in all of us. And there was a great movement of intelligence, which we believe was Genesis. And as intelligence came to know itself, as energy itself interacted with itself, it formed the particle, which formed the molecule, which then gave birth to the material world. So everything that we experience in the universe today, in the material world, and what we would call reality, is simply the material expression of all that is, which is intelligence itself, or energy, or God, or consciousness, or awareness, or whatever you want to call it. So when you're not aligned with it, and the truth that it is, and you are interacting with it in infinitely intelligent ways that are always for your greatest growth and prosperity and benefit and evolution. Anytime you interpret what is, or reality, as something other than that, your body's designed to move into suffering. And we're supposed to know, to go, oh, I've just disconnected with reality itself. I actually think that someone should not have said that. Or I think this thing is wrong, or I think this thing should not have happened, and to course correct, but nobody's ever given us the manual to the human being. So that's kind of what this conversation is about. So uh, I think I just lost where I was in the conversation, JJ. I was gonna move on to share with you
You had a story.
a story, right? So I had a client that I was working with early on, really successful 29-year-old young man, Muslim, Egyptian, powerhouse was of a human being, was an entrepreneur since he was 17 years old. Now, never felt like he belonged, because when they came over here from Egypt and the fact that he was Muslim, he always felt, like he was on the outside, he was ostracized, he was ridiculed. So I'm coaching him for about a year and a half. He's out one Friday night in Miami at an exclusive get together with other influencers, the vice president of the Miami Heat, the number one DJ in Miami, the other mover and shaker A, B, C, D, E, and they're all out together. So he calls me on Saturday and he says, "Hey man, I was out last night and I moved into suffering and I tried to do the work, but I'm having an issue with it." I said, "Great, walk me through what you did." He said, "Well, I noticed I moved into suffering. And I know that what you teach is that the suffering is caused by my own thinking." So I stopped and I looked at the thinking, and what I saw was that I was thinking that I don't belong here. I was like, "That's great. So what did you do?" He said, "Well, I know that what you've also coached me on is that if I don't belong here is causing suffering, then it's not true." So I looked at "I don't belong here," and I knew that if it wasn't true, then some form of the opposite must be true. And I said, "Okay, great. What'd you find?" He goes, "Well, that I do belong here." And I said, "Well, did that move you back into a beautiful state?" He said, "No, I couldn't buy into it." He said, "Okay, got it." So, I work with this young man, so I have leverage. So I said, "Let me ask you a question." I said, "You believe in God, don't you?" He said, "I do," because he did. I said, "Well, the omnipotent, omniscient, all-knowing kind?" He goes, "Yeah, that's my God." I go, "Well, then how did he make a mistake on Friday night?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, how did he put you in a place where you don't belong?" And there was a pause on the other end of the line. And then he said, "Oh my God." And I said, "What'd you see?" He said, "I belong everywhere I am." That's transformation. That's a fundamental shift in the way he perceives his relationship with space, time, and reality itself. Now, that doesn't mean that it won't be triggered again, but this time he's going to see it again very quickly and go, "Oh, there it is again. I don't belong. I know that what's true for me is I belong everywhere I am." And so as he moves back into a beautiful state of being, he reconnects with the people around him. He reconnects with vitality, energy, resource, intelligence, and he can start showing up powerfully in his life again. So I'm not trying to convince him of something else. I want to give him the tools to look at the unintelligent thinking. And then there's this moment where you see your unintelligent thinking as unintelligent, and there's a rapid shift in the neural networks of your brain. There's a reorganization that takes place. And that, for us, has produced radical changes. And by us, I mean for Carol and I, in who we are and how we show up in the world. Because we've just systematically started eliminating all of the negative bias of our mind by utilizing this process. And it's what the people in our community are doing to create really radical shifts in the way that they're being in the world. And as you know, when that happens, now all of a sudden, the money shows up, the clients show up, the relationship shows up, like whatever it is you want starts showing up, because you're no longer creating dissonance in the spectrum of creation as a result of entangling yourself with unintelligent thinking. And what we believe, just to kind of put a cap on this, is that this next level of technology related to personal evolution, which is a pruning of the neural networks that represent the survival-based unintelligent thinking, and an establishment and reinforcement of the truth within the structure of the brain, is the linchpin of the next evolution of the human species. And we think that this is really important work, because if you look at what's happening in the world is in a process of self-destruction. And there's a question as to whether or not the species will even survive. And all of that is born out of our internal world and unintelligence. So needless to say, we're kind of passionate about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm sitting here smiling ear to ear when you're telling that story about coaching that 29-year-old Egyptian guy, and your response. My last relationship, his grandmother, she's now 92, but at the time maybe she was in her late 80s, very political, skews Republican, very Republican. And at the time was because she's also late 80s, thought, I've lived, I've seen what happens, therefore
Mm.
I know what's best. And so she justified her worry about the future of our lives based on what was going on in politics. And I don't really do politics. So I listened to her because she's very positive on one end in life, but on the other end, she's always really worried about things, and she thinks certain things are just very wrong. And I stopped her and I said, because she's a churchgoer, and I said, Grandma, you go to church? Yes. Do you believe in God? Yes. Do you think God has a plan? Yes. Then isn't this part of the plan? Why not let God do his work? You just go about, just relax, go about into just trust. There's a process and plan.
So good. Yeah.
Right? Because I'm like, how do I tell a 86, 89-year-old woman who has justified her worry about the planet and about the world for so long? Well, I hit her through God, because she goes to church every week and she says she believes in God. So then show me you believe in God by trusting that it's out of your hands and there's not too much you're going to do about it. And that shut her up so fast. So, and that's why I'm smiling, because it's a desperation. Like, how do because the words you're using, the words I'm using, I didn't think that was going to work with an 86-year-old, but to bring it back to God and to simplify it down to your belief system. So that was beautiful. So let's go through. I agree with you. I'm on that page. It is my mission. I love empowering people. I love changing lives. I love getting them out of that mix. And I love your method. I love the visualization in your word choice, like pruning. That's awesome. Because it really gets people, when you can visualize it, when you can see it, it becomes real. And understanding that you're going in to remove that unintelligence thinking, and to use the words like pruning and unintelligent, that for me really is a new level and another tool to really quickly, like you said, get out of a state of suffering and back into a state of beautiful and beauty and a beautiful state. So I love that. So let's continue on how you deliver that. And I know that you have a free book that you offer people, and you've got it in a course and an event. And so, but I want to go through if there's anything more on the Mind Hack success model.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, the first step when you really look at it, JJ, is eliminating the unintelligent thinking, which is producing suffering. So, when we ask people, hey, entrepreneurs, in an average day, how much time do you spend in suffering? If you add up all the stress, the anxiety, the overwhelm, the indecision, the procrastination, the worrying, the self-judgment, the criticizing others, there's this long litany of things. And all of a sudden people realize, wow, like for the most part, I'm operating with this thing called suffering that's moving me into a low-level fight or flight most of my day. And that becomes our default response to the experiences of our life, even though the experiences of our life are not inherently threatening. And so, conservatively, as I ask people this from stage to stage, 3 to 4 hours on average a day. Some people say half their time, all their waking hours, even when they sleep. There's a tremendous amount of attention being put towards unintelligence, which is producing unenjoyable lives. I mean, you're talking about 1,200 hours a year, 1,500 hours a year. So we hear from people all the time, well, there's not enough time. It's like, well, how are you using the time you have? Because if you're entangling yourself with unintelligence, it's not a really good use of your time. And by the way, it's making you sick. And it's not conducive with you being an amazing parent or partner. Or people go, I don't have enough money. And we go, well, I mean, how much more money do you think you would be making if you were operating from a place of power and intelligence and resource another 1,200 hours a year? So like when you start to lay it out that way, there's no mystery why people feel stuck. And we've just kind of dialed it into this focal point of suffering. So the first thing we want to do is help people notice when they've moved into a suffering state and give them the tools to move back into their power, which is a beautiful state of being. Once you're living in a practice of that, which accelerates pretty quickly. And the brain is such an amazing technology because like however you use it, it starts automatically using that in a greater capacity. So over the course of 3 months, 6 months, we see people who have a radically different relationship with their entire life as a result of just, working this daily practice. Then you start to get into creative principles. And that's what's really mapped out in the Mind Hack Success System. And at the foundation of that system is, I always struggled with changing my beliefs. I mean, I don't anymore because we've got a much more advanced technology that I'm using that we're also teaching. But early on, I remember like the hardest thing was like, okay, I'm aware that I think money's hard to make. That's what I believe. But how do I change that belief? right? I'm aware that I don't trust people, but how do I change that belief? And I think, again, that's where personal development is today. You have an entire generation of people who are becoming self-aware and have no idea what to do with what they're becoming aware of. And so the 2 millimeter distinction, which is at the foundation of the structure of the mind hack system, is, and I'm going to say it, and oftentimes people just hear it but don't appreciate the depth of the distinction, is that beliefs are decisions. So you may have unconsciously believed when you were 4 years old that, you weren't good enough or you didn't know how to do it right, but it began to shape your lens. And because you're not aware of it, in every present moment, you're viewing life and the experiences of today through that lens. So you're unconsciously deciding over and over and over again that there's no good men or women out there. You're deciding that people don't appreciate you. You're deciding that nobody wants to hear what you have to say. And the beauty of that distinction is we know how to make new decisions. We don't know how to make new beliefs, but we know how to make new decisions. So when you understand that beliefs are decisions, all of a sudden you start to tap into your personal responsibility, which is your ability to respond to how you're interacting with your own life and to start making some new decisions. And so people go, well, wait, let me get this straight. Like, I can just really make a decision that money's easy to make? And we go, yeah, you can. You just kind of came to the conclusion when you were 4 years old and heard mom and dad arguing about money, that money was hard to make or that money caused problems. And because of the way the technology of the human being works, the brain will prove that hypothesis out for you. So at any moment in time, you can just make a new decision about life that's different than the decision you made before. And then people say, well, what decision should I make? And we go, well, wait, if your decisions are producing your future, right? Just like your beliefs were producing your future, shouldn't you just get clear on the future that you want to create and make decisions that are congruent with it? And then people go, okay, got it. But like, don't I need to know the how? Don't I need to know how I'm going to grow my business to 6 figures this year? Don't I need to know how I'm going to find the man or woman of my dreams? Don't I need to know how I'm going to achieve health? And we go, no, you don't. That's actually where most people get caught, is you don't need to know the how. In fact, you have to decide before you know the how. The decision unfolds the how. There was this awesome study done. It was in Time Magazine at Harvard in 2009, where they brought in piano players to play the piano and they studied which parts of their brains lit up. Then they had the pianists come in and just imagine playing the piano and the same parts of the brains lit up. And so what we discovered was that the brain doesn't really know the difference between imagination and reality. And what most people do is they have a vision for their life, but all of a sudden they go, I don't know how. And so they back off the vision, or they back off the decision. But the truth is that when you hold that vision and when you hold that image and when you stick to that decision, you start to imagine it. So you literally build new neural networks. You literally build a memory of something that hasn't happened yet. And it's that change in the brain that starts to, let's call it, attract or download to you the thoughts, the ideas. It reshapes your perception so that you see the path and the opportunity. It starts to create coincidence and synchronicity in your life to bring that image or that decision or that vision into reality. But most people think they need to know the how, and that's where they get stuck. So the mind hack structure first evaluates all of the decisions that you've made about your life and helps you understand where you've unconsciously decided things that aren't congruent with the vision that you're trying to create. And then we go through a series of other distinctions, things that seem really benign at first, like getting more clarity, having gratitude, asking powerful questions, because the brain is like a search engine. So ask and you shall receive. Ways to hack fear and to step more powerfully forward into your life with confidence. And when people apply this structure and this daily practice to their lives, again, as you know, like all of a sudden people from the outside in look in and go like, oh my God, what happened? Like, you look like a miracle maker. And it's like, no, these aren't miracles. This is called what happens when you actually realign with reality. And so many people are operating in the deep unreality right now. And as a result of that, they're entangled with unintelligence. They don't have clarity. They're asking themselves really crappy questions. They've got limiting beliefs rather than empowered decisions. And so they're stuck. They're stuck operating at human 1.0 rather than learning the skills. Because if you really think about it, and then I'll be quiet for a second, mindset, in my opinion, is the developed capacity to utilize the mind to rewire and restructure your brain. Anything else that someone's calling mindset, I don't know. I don't know what it is. But when you make that the most important skill for you to develop, all of a sudden you become a phenomenon. Like, you start becoming a powerful creator in your life, you start experiencing more joy in your life, and you access that kingdom that some very powerful people talked about a few thousand years ago that supposedly is right in front of us right now.
I think you just gave me a new relationship to the word mindset. I have hated the word mindset.
Me too.
Uh, yeah, hated, because just like I explained my own sort of come to Jesus moment of realizing that, yes, I intellectually, consciously understand the law of attraction, but I am not subconsciously nor in my actions and behaviors living it. So, and again, that embodiment part is missing when people focus on the mind, and people just like, and that's probably where it comes from. All of the people who downplay law of attraction, I would probably agree with them if we compare it to how people upplay what I think is mindset, and mindset in a very surface way, not in a neurological and neural reprogramming way. Harville
Mm.
Hendricks was on the show a while ago, and we had an amazing show, and he talked about that neural rewiring. And it's not the first time or the second time that we've had that conversation on the show. But if when we put it like that, when we explain the ideas, because when I teach emotion, it does have to start in that observation interpretation piece, right? Emotions aren't just floating around. And so that, like you just talked about, the unintelligent versus intelligent, really, it is in the mind. I guess I get really frustrated when people don't bring it into the body, past the mind, and just keep it in intellect. So thank you for the new definition of mindset that I'm going to, after I edit the show, I'm going to write down and I'm going to remember, and I'm going to have a new relationship with. So you are teaching, I get it. Again, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show, because this is going to resonate with people in a different way. For some people, a lot, and it's going to be the missing link. And for some people, they're going to be able to see some of the similarities that law of attraction provides if they don't understand. For me, when I understand something like intuitively, I don't need the proof.
Hmm.
I don't need the science. I don't need the structure of the data, because it resonates so deep and so strong that I know it. I just know it to be. It's like I bought Bruce Lipton's book, Biology of Belief, because I wanted to read it to argue with a friend of mine. And I thought, why am I going to? I don't need to argue with him. He can believe what he wants to believe. I believe it. I don't want to read the book because I already get it. I'm like, yes, yes. I don't, I'm sure there's lots to learn in there, but I don't need to be convinced because I know it. So let's go into how you help people do this process. Both, I know you have a free book that you offer to people. I know you have a live event. I know you've got a program. So let's talk about, if people at this point are now like, okay, yes, I want that. I need to do that right now. How do we get it?
Right. So the sort of the crown jewel of what we've created is an event that we do once a year called the Powerful Living Experience. It's a 3-day transformational event that, for lack of a better word, is an experience. It's 3 days of immersion in this technology with, 800 to 1,000 amazing entrepreneurs. The event's grown really, really quickly. It was named as a top 3 must-attend personal development event for entrepreneurs by Inc., which we were really honored to have. And so, those dates change every year, and people can find out information about the event at powerfullivingexperience.com. Where most people start is with our Mind Hack ebook. And as they go through the Mind Hack ebook and feel the work resonates with them, there's an opportunity to actually go through the Mind Hack program, which is a digital program that takes people literally through the process of identifying all of their resistance, of identifying all of their unintelligent thinking and their limiting beliefs, and utilizing everything that we've talked about here to create a transformation around that, which is a real brain change. It's the meditations, it's the daily practice, it's the rituals, it's the technology that we teach called neurosculpting. Yeah, so where most people start out is by downloading the Mind Hack book, which is the book that you referred to, JJ. And anyone who's listening to this call can download the book at mindhackprogram.com/JJ. And not only can you download the Mind Hack book for free, but there's also a free 4-part video training series that walks through the power of decision, that talks about unintelligent thinking and inner resistance and the inner conflict. And at the end of that video training series, if anybody wants to go deeper into the work and get into the Mind Hack program or get more involved in our community, they can do that as well. So that's a great place for people to start, is just to go to the mindhackprogram.com/JJ URL, download the book, watch the videos, and then it's kind of like you choose your own adventure from there.
Excellent. I know everybody's going to go and do that, because this is a time of year where all of those unintelligent thoughts creep up, right? With holidays and really saying, I don't really like this and I want to change this. So this is the perfect time for everybody to get your free ebook, mindhackprogram.com/JJ, so that you can get the 4-part training series and get put into the community. So make sure to go do that. Again, mindhackprogram.com/JJ. And David, I don't have this level of conversation with most of my guests about this subject. I know there's a lot of crossover, but I think our mission is the same, to really get people into a state of beautiful state,
Yeah.
and into a state of happy and attracting and power and joy. And so if you're willing, I'd love to have you back. Again, we can definitely cover some more of this amazing technology that you are putting out into the world for people to more easily find a tool and a structure that serves them, that makes sense to them, that resonates with them on a different level.
Yeah, I would love to. This is a great conversation, JJ, and I appreciate you furthering this conversation into the world and all the work that you do, because if we can help people learn how to be happy, happy people don't do bad things in the world. So I think it's a good place to start.
Agreed. And if you don't mind, and you can say no to this, I'd love to do your chart because I really want to know what your moon sign is. Or do you already know?
We can absolutely do my chart.
I'd love to see how your brain works from an astrological point of view. David, thank you so much for being a guest today. We're going to have you back. Everyone go to mindhackprogram.com/JJ. Get your copy now so that you can live a different 2019, and we'll have you back here soon.
Awesome. Thanks, JJ. Appreciate you.